The twin suns of Vera shone over the crystal towers of the royal city. Their light fell upon long streets paved with stone that glowed faintly underfoot. Merchants shouted their prices in the open markets while silver banners swayed in the high breeze. Above all, the palace of the royal family stood like a mountain of glass, its spires rising higher than the eye could follow. The empire of Vera was strong, proud, and ancient. Yet within its walls, something unusual was about to begin. Mark, a human from Earth, stood in the shadow of the great palace gates. He wore the simple armor of the royal guard, a shining plate that seemed far too heavy for him compared to the towering alien soldiers around. The others had scaled skin, or gleaming horns, or eyes that glowed faintly with color. Mark looked, plain among them. His short brown hair, calm blue eyes, and quiet stance made him seem like a servant rather than a warrior. Whispers followed him as he waited for the summons. "Why would they choose a human?" one alien guard muttered to another. "He will fail within a day," another said with a sharp laugh. Mark heard the words, but he gave no answer. He stood straight, holding his spear firm in his hand, his gaze steady on the palace doors. The doors opened with a low hum. An attendant in silver robes beckoned. "Guard Mark of Earth, you are called." Mark stepped forward. His boots echoed against the polished floor of the grand hall. Tall pillars rose around him, each carved with the history of the royal line. At the far end of the chamber sat the throne, and upon it, the king of Vera. His crown glimmered like fire, and his deep voice carried across the hall. "Mark of Earth," the king said, "you have been chosen for a task no other human has ever received. You will serve as protector to my daughter, Princess Alira." Mark bowed deeply. "I accept, Your Majesty." A ripple of surprise passed through the gathered court. Alien nobles exchanged doubtful glances. Some even laughed softly behind their jeweled hands. The king's voice silenced them. "My daughter must learn strength from many sources," he said. "Perhaps even from one who seems weak. Mark, your duty begins this day." The sound of light footsteps drew Mark's attention. From behind the throne, Princess Alira appeared. She was tall and graceful, her eyes shining like silver, her skin faintly luminous in the sunlight streaming through the high windows. A crown of small crystals rested on her dark hair. She looked at Mark with curiosity, not contempt. "So this is the human," Alira said, her tone calm. "He does not look like much." Mark lowered his head. "I am here to serve, Princess." Alira studied him for a long moment. Her people had always judged worth by strength, power, and the ability to command. Yet here stood a man with none of those things, at least none that could be seen. She decided then that she would test him. If he was to guard her, he must prove himself. The king dismissed the court, and the great hall emptied. Soon Mark was left with the princess and her small group of attendants. She walked past him, her long gown sweeping across the floor. Without looking back, she said, "Follow me, guard. Let us see what you are capable of." Mark obeyed. The palace gardens stretched out in a maze of trees that glowed faintly at their roots, their leaves whispering with soft music in the wind. Alira walked quickly, her steps light, her head high. Mark followed at a respectful distance, always alert, his hand never far from the hilt of his blade. Suddenly, Alira stopped at the center of the garden. "Tell me, human," she said, turning to face him, "why did you accept this duty? Do you not fear serving among people who see you as lesser?" Mark answered without hesitation. "Fear does not guide me, Princess. Duty does. I was asked to guard you, so I will guard you. That is enough." Her eyes narrowed. She had expected excuses or a proud speech, but his words were plain and steady. She wanted to know more, but instead, she tested him. She gestured to one of her attendants, who vanished into the garden shadows. A moment later, a sudden blur of motion came rushing toward her from the side, a staged attack. Mark reacted at once. He stepped in front of the princess, raising his spear. The attacker's blade clashed against his weapon, the sound ringing across the garden. Though the attacker was stronger and larger, Mark held firm, his stance rooted to the ground. With a sharp twist, he pushed the blade aside and forced the attacker back. The princess had not expected such speed. Her eyes widened as Mark returned to his calm stance, as if nothing had happened. The attacker bowed and stepped back into the shadows, the test complete. Alira said nothing for a moment. Finally, she spoke softly. "Perhaps you are not as weak as you appear." Mark gave a small nod. "I am only doing my duty, Princess." As the suns dipped lower in the sky, Alira led him back to the palace. She did not speak further, but her thoughts were restless. She had tested him once, and he had not failed. She wondered how many times it would take to discover his true limits, or if he had any at all. For Mark, the day ended as it began, with silence. Yet within him, he carried a steady fire. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. To guard the princess was more than a task. It was a trial before the eyes of an empire that did not believe in him. Still, he would not bend, for he had chosen his path. The first night of Mark's duty as guard passed in silence. He stood outside the princess's chamber, holding his spear, watching the long corridor stretch into darkness. Alien guards patrolled in pairs, their armor glinting under the pale glow of the wall lanterns. Some gave him cold looks, others smirked as they passed. None spoke kindly. Mark did not answer their stares. He simply stood, steady as a stone. Princess Alira, however, was not asleep. From within her chamber she watched, through a small opening in the door. The human did not move, did not rest, and did not lean against the wall. He simply remained there. She closed the opening and thought to herself, "He has patience, but patience alone is not enough. I must test him more." The next morning, Alira summoned him. She wore a gown of silver silk, and her crown of small crystals caught the light like tiny stars. Her attendants stood around her as she spoke. "Guard, Mark. Today you will walk with me in the inner palace. Keep your eyes open. The halls of this place are not always safe." Mark bowed. "Yes, Princess." She led him through winding corridors. Strange lights flickered in the crystal walls, and statues of old kings watched silently from their pedestals. Then, at a turning, Alira suddenly walked faster, her gown sweeping ahead. She slipped into a side passage, narrow and dark, leaving her attendants behind. Mark followed at once. The corridor split into 3 paths, each vanishing into shadow. He stopped, listening. The faint echo of footsteps guided him to the middle path. He quickened his pace, turning corners, his hand ready on his blade. Finally, he found her waiting, at the end of the hall. She stood with her arms crossed. "You did not lose me," she said. "That is good. Many guards have failed to follow when I test them here." Mark gave a small nod. "I only listened, Princess." Her lips curved in a slight smile, but she quickly hid it. She motioned for him to continue walking beside her. Later, that day she set another trial. She ordered Mark to guard the palace library, a place where endless shelves rose into the high ceiling. "Remain here until I return," she told him. "Do not leave your post no matter what happens." Mark stood by the doorway as she entered with her attendants. Hours passed. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and dust. A distant rumble echoed through the hall, like something falling. One of the attendants hurried out and said, "Guard, the princess calls for help inside. A shelf has collapsed." Mark's eyes narrowed. He remembered her order. She had told him not to. Move! He stayed in place, his grip tight on his spear. Minutes later, Alira herself stepped out of the shadows. There was no fallen shelf, no cry for help. She studied him with calm eyes. "You obey orders even when tempted to break them," she said. "That shows discipline. But tell me, if it had been real danger, would you still stand and do nothing?" Mark answered, his voice steady. "If you command me to stay, I stay. If you command me to fight, I fight. My choice is to follow your word, Princess." Her eyes softened. She was beginning to see the depth of his loyalty, though she still wished to know more. That night she made her most difficult test yet. She ordered him to guard her as she walked through the palace gardens under moonlight. The trees whispered softly, glowing at their roots. Strange shapes moved in the branches, for the gardens were home to many hidden creatures. Alira walked ahead without fear. Suddenly, from the dark leaves, 3 masked figures leapt out. Their blades flashed as they rushed at her. Alira knew it was another test, arranged in secret with loyal guards, but she did not speak. She wanted to see how the human would react. Mark sprang forward, his spear spinning in his hands. The first attacker swung, but Mark blocked, twisting the weapon aside. The second rushed in, and Mark kicked him back with sudden force. The third aimed at Alira directly. Mark stepped between, taking the blow on his armored shoulder. With a firm strike of his spear, he drove the attacker back. The fight ended quickly. The masked figures bowed and slipped into the shadows, their test complete. Alira stared at Mark, her heart unsettled. He had taken the blow without hesitation, as though his own safety meant nothing. "You would put yourself in danger for me?" she asked quietly. Mark adjusted his spear, his face calm. "It is my duty, Princess. Your life is worth more than mine. If you are safe, then I have done my work." For the first time, Alira felt unsure of herself. She had thought to expose his weakness, but each test only revealed greater strength, not in muscle, but in spirit. His patience, his loyalty, his courage, all were unlike what she had known among the warriors of her people. That night, as she sat by her window looking at the 2 moons of Vera, she thought of the human guard standing outside her chamber. She remembered the way he blocked the attack without fear, the way he obeyed even when tempted, the way he listened in silence. Her heart whispered a truth she was not ready to admit. This humble guard was not weak. He carried a strength her people had never understood. The days passed, and the human guard remained at the princess's side. Mark spoke little, but his silence was never heavy. It was the silence of steady ground, a silence that brought calm rather than unease. Princess Alira began to notice this, though she did not say it aloud. Each morning she walked through the palace gardens or the long crystal halls, and Mark followed quietly. At first she had tested him at every step, setting traps and arranging false dangers, but with each trial, he had proven himself. Now she found herself watching him more closely, not as a subject of curiosity, but as a person she wished to understand. One afternoon, Alira sat beneath the wide branches of a glowing tree. Its leaves shimmered in pale blue light, and soft music floated from the wind moving through them. She looked at Mark, who stood a few steps behind, his spear resting by his side. "Guard Mark," she said. "You are always silent. Do humans not speak?" Mark looked at her with calm eyes. "We speak, Princess, but words are not always needed. Silence can say enough." She tilted her head. "Yet I wish to hear more. Tell me of your world. Tell me of Earth. For the first time." Mark's expression softened. He stepped closer, still keeping the respectful distance of a guard. Earth is smaller than Vera. Its skies are wide, filled with blue by day and stars by night. Its seas stretch like endless mirrors. We have forests where the trees rise so high that light struggles to touch the ground. and we have rivers, clear and strong, that carry life wherever they go. Alira listened with deep interest. She had known only the crystal towers and glowing gardens of her own world. "And your people?" she asked. "What are they like?" "Ordinary," Mark said. "We are not as strong as the warriors of Vera. We do not have glowing eyes or skin of stone. But humans endure. We work, we build, we fall, we rise again. Even in hardship, we keep moving forward." The princess rested her hands on her knees, thinking. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight she could feel. Her people had always measured strength in power, in weapons, in command. But here was a man speaking of rivers, forests, and the quiet will to endure. The next day, Alira asked him to walk with her to the high balconies of the palace. From there, the view stretched far over the city, where the markets buzzed with sound and the spires reached toward the twin suns. She leaned against the rail and looked down. "Do you not feel small here?" she asked. "Among so many who see you as less?" Mark shook his head. "I do not measure myself against their eyes. I measure myself against what I choose to do. If I keep my duty, I am not small." Alira turned to look at him. There was no pride in his voice, only quiet certainty. For the first time, she felt a faint warmth rise in her chest. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was only curiosity. That evening, she invited him into the royal library, not as a guard at the door, but as company. Tall shelves towered above them, filled with glowing tablets and ancient scrolls. She sat at a carved desk, reading aloud the tales of old kings. Then she placed the scroll aside and said, "Now you tell me a story, something from Earth." Mark thought for a moment, then spoke. "There is a tale of a farmer who faced a great storm. His crops were ruined, his house broken, his fields drowned. Many told him to leave and search for a new life. But he stayed. He rebuilt his house, he planted again, and he waited. Seasons passed, but in time his fields grew rich once more. He did not become a king nor a hero, but his children lived, and their children after them. That is enough." Alira leaned forward slightly. "Your people honor such a man." "We honor those who do not give up," Mark said. The princess fell silent, her eyes studying him. She had read countless tales of warriors and conquerors, but never had she heard a story that praised patience more than power. The days turned into weeks. Alira found herself asking more questions, walking longer paths with him, listening for his voice when he chose to speak. His answers were never grand, never boastful, but they always stayed with her. She noticed how he watched the people around him, not with suspicion, but with quiet care. He was always alert, yet never restless. One evening, as the sun set in gold and crimson, Alira stood on the palace steps while Mark waited nearby. She looked at him and said, "Why do you never speak of yourself? You tell me of your world, of your people, but not of you." Mark hesitated. His gaze moved to the horizon. "Because I am not important, princess. I am a guard. My story is to stand where I am told, and to protect who I must." Alira's eyes softened. "But I wish to know." Mark gave a quiet breath, as though releasing a weight. "I was born in a small village by a river. My family worked the fields. I left to serve as a soldier. I was not the strongest, not the fastest, but I did my part. When the call came to send one human to the Empire, I stepped forward. That is all." Alira studied him for a long time. His story was plain, yet there was something in its plainness that felt more noble than any tale of triumph she had heard. That night, as she lay in her chamber, she realized her thoughts lingered on the human more often than she wished. His words echoed in her mind. His steady eyes returned to her whenever she closed her own. She tried to remind herself that he was only a guard, only a duty, but deep within, she felt the beginnings of something more. The palace of Vera prepared for a grand gathering. Nobles from distant houses arrived in shining ships, their banners bright against the night sky. The great hall was filled with music and the hum of voices. Crystal lamps glowed from the high ceiling, scattering soft light over the guests. Princess Alira stood at the center of attention. She wore a gown of silver threads, each movement catching the light like water. Her crown rested lightly on her dark hair, and her expression was calm. Beside her, silent as ever, stood Mark. His armor was simple compared to the jeweled suits of alien guards around them, yet his presence felt steady, unshaken by the grandeur of the event. Many nobles glanced at him with thin smiles or quiet laughter. A human guard standing so close to the princess seemed strange, almost insulting to some. Yet Alira allowed no one else at her side. She had tested him again and again, and he had never faltered. Tonight she trusted him more than any other. As the evening grew, speeches were given and toasts raised. The king addressed the crowd, speaking of peace, unity, and strength of the empire. Then music swelled and dancers moved across the floor, their gowns flowing like rivers of color. Alira leaned slightly toward Mark. "Watch carefully," she whispered. "Not all who come here tonight bring goodwill." Mark nodded once. His eyes scanned the crowd, calm but alert. The feast continued. Plates of bright fruit and glowing drinks passed among the guests. Laughter filled the air, but Mark did not let it ease his focus. He noticed a shadow of movement near the tall pillars of the hall. A figure slipped from the crowd, moving with too much intent. Before Mark could act, the figure lunged forward, a hidden blade flashing. The target was clear: the princess. In one motion, Mark stepped between Alira and the attacker. The blade struck his shoulder plate, sliding off with a sharp ring. Mark's spear rose in the same breath, striking the attacker's arm. The weapon clattered to the floor. Guards rushed forward, seizing the would-be assassin. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles whispered, shocked not only by the attack, but by the sight of the human guard standing firm, his shoulder wounded, but his stance unbroken. Alira's hand trembled for a moment, but she quickly steadied it. She looked at Mark, who bowed slightly, his voice calm. "You are safe, princess." The king declared the gathering ended at once. The guests were escorted out, their voices buzzing with rumor and disbelief. The assassin was taken to the dungeons for questioning. Soon, the hall stood empty except for Alira and Mark. Alira turned to him. "You took the blade meant for me." Mark looked at the cut in his armor. "It is my duty." Her voice grew sharper. "No, it was more than duty. You could have stepped aside, yet you chose to take the strike. Why?" Mark paused, his calm eyes meeting hers. "Because your life matters more than mine. That is the truth, princess." Alira's heart beat faster. For weeks she had tried to hide the change growing within her, but now the moment had come. She could not remain silent. She stepped closer, her voice low, almost trembling. "Mark, I set trials before you to see if you were worthy. I wanted to find your weakness. But all I have found is strength, patience, and loyalty. You have guarded me with your life, and more than that, you have shown me a spirit unlike any I have known. I cannot ignore it anymore." Mark stood still, unsure of her meaning. "Princess?" Alira's silver eyes glimmered as she spoke the words she had kept hidden. "I care for you, Mark, not only as my guard, but as more. I did not expect this, yet it is the truth. I love you." The words hung in the silent hall like a secret revealed. Mark felt his chest tighten. He had sworn to serve, not to seek more. Yet in that moment, he could not deny what his own heart carried. Slowly, He bowed his head. "Princess," he said softly, "I am only a guard. My place is behind you, not beside you. But if I must speak truly, then I admit I feel the same." Alira's breath caught. She had feared he would refuse that. His loyalty would chain him to silence. But hearing his words filled her with a warmth she had never known. Still, Mark continued, his voice steady. "Even so, my duty comes first. Your safety, your honor, your throne, all are greater than me. I cannot put myself above them. But whatever I feel, I will protect you until my last breath." Alira stepped closer, so near that she could see the calm fire in his eyes. "Then know this," she said. "To me, you are not lesser. To me, you are not only a guard. Whatever comes, I will not let others decide what my heart must feel." For a moment, the silence between them felt like the turning of fate itself. But outside the palace walls, rumors were already spreading. The nobles whispered of the assassin, of the human who stood in the way, of the princess who looked at him, with something more than duty. Some called it weakness, others called it scandal. Alira and Mark did not yet know the storm that was gathering. They only knew the truth revealed in that quiet hall, that love had grown where none expected it. The day after the attack, the palace halls were filled with whispers. Servants carried trays of food, but spoke quietly to one another. Guards patrolled with sharper eyes. Nobles walked with stiff expressions, their voices hushed but quick. Everywhere, rumors spread like fire through dry grass. The words were always the same. The princess favors the human. The princess looks at her guard with love. At first, Alira tried to ignore it. She focused on her duties, met with advisors, and walked the halls with her head high. But she could feel the eyes watching her, judging her. She knew her people valued strength above all things, and to them, a human seemed weak. To care for, one was seen as dishonor. Mark felt the weight as well. Wherever he walked, other guards whispered. Some laughed openly at him, others scowled as though his very presence insulted them. Yet he did not answer their words. He stood firm, always, at the princess's side, never bending, never showing anger. One evening, the king called Alira and Mark into the throne room. The great chamber was quiet, save for the low hum of the crystal walls. The king's eyes were stern as he spoke. "Daughter," he said, "rumors have spread among the houses. They say your heart leans toward your human guard. They call it weakness. They call it shame. Tell me, is it true?" Alira's voice did not falter. "Yes, father, it is true. I do not deny it." The king's eyes hardened. "You know what this means. The rival houses will see this as a chance to strike. They already believe humans are beneath us. They will use this to claim you are unfit for the throne." "I do not care for their words," Alira replied firmly. "Mark has proven himself in ways none of our warriors have. His courage is greater than their pride." The king looked at Mark. "And you, human? Do you dare think yourself worthy of my daughter?" Mark bowed low. His voice was calm. "I do not think of worth, Majesty. I think only of duty. My life is to guard her, even if it costs me everything. What she feels is her choice. I will never place myself above her throne." The king's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. Then he waved a hand. "Leave me. I must think." Alira and Mark stepped out of the chamber, their steps echoing in the long hall. The princess's face was calm, but her heart was restless. She knew her father cared for her, but she also knew the rival houses would not wait long before moving against them. That night, the storm began. In the shadows of the outer city, envoys from a rival house gathered. They spoke in low, sharp voices. "The princess has betrayed our honor. She loves a human, a weak creature, This cannot stand. The people will not follow a leader who lowers herself so. They planned, they plotted, and soon their whispers reached even the palace. Servants carried false tales, claiming the human was a spy, claiming he was placed to weaken the royal line. Each lie was sharper than the last, meant to cut Alira's image in the eyes of her people. Mark noticed the change quickly. Wherever they went, the stares grew colder. Merchants who once bowed now turned their heads away. Even among the palace staff, silence followed them. He said nothing, but he saw it all. One evening, as the sun set in red light, Alira stood on the high balcony. Mark was a few steps behind her, as always. She spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of worry. "Do you see it, Mark? The looks, the whispers. They will not forgive me for caring for you. To them, it is weakness." Mark's voice was steady. "Then let them call it weakness. If it is truth, it cannot be undone by words." She turned to face him. "But truth alone does not keep a throne. They will try to take it. They will try to take me." Mark's eyes did not waver. "Then they will face me first." Her heart stirred at his words, yet fear remained. She knew the rival houses had armies, wealth, and spies. Mark was only one man, and though strong of spirit, he was human. The next day, their fears became reality. A messenger arrived, his face pale, his voice urgent. "Princess, the House of Tainar has broken from the court. They call you unworthy and declare that a human has poisoned your mind. Their soldiers march already. They mean to take the palace." The king gathered his council at once. Alira sat beside him, Mark standing guard behind her. Voices rose in anger and fear. Some advisors demanded the human be cast out at once to calm the people. Others urged for war. Alira rose from her seat, her voice strong. "I will not cast him out. He has saved me when none of you could. If the House of Tainar wishes to challenge me, let them face me openly. I will not bend to lies." The room fell silent. Her words carried more weight than the shouts of the council. Mark stood quietly behind her, but his heart felt the storm closing in. He knew the battle was no longer only of blades. It was of trust, of loyalty, of the truth itself. That night, as he stood outside her chamber, he thought of Earth. He thought of the farmer who rebuilt after the storm. He thought of patience, of strength born not from might, but from will. And he promised himself that whatever came, he would stand unbroken. Alira, within her chamber, sat by her window. She looked out at the dark horizon where enemy fires already burned. Fear touched her heart, but it was not only for her throne, it was for the man who stood outside her door, steady as always, ready to face a world that doubted him. The rising threat was here, and the days ahead would test not only their bond, but the fate of the empire itself. The morning after the rival house declared war, the palace was tense. Guards moved quickly through the halls, checking doors and corridors. Couriers ran with urgent messages, and advisors spoke in hurried whispers. Every sound seemed louder than usual, and every shadow felt heavier. Mark walked beside Princess Alira as she inspected the palace gates. Her eyes scanned the walls, the watchtowers, and the distant city streets. Though the palace was fortified, she knew the enemy would not wait. Their plan would come fast and cruel. "Mark," she said quietly, "the House of Tainar will not. Give us time to prepare. They will strike when they see weakness. Are you ready?" Mark's calm voice answered her. "I have always been ready, Princess. My duty does not change." Alira looked at him and felt a strange warmth. His courage did not come from arrogance nor from pride. It came from a quiet determination that refused to bend, no matter the odds. But the danger came sooner than they expected. That afternoon, as the princess walked through the private gardens, a group of masked figures appeared. They were soldiers from the rival house, and they moved swiftly, surrounding the area. Mark reacted immediately, stepping in front of Alira. His spear held firm. "Step back, princess." She did as he said, her heart beating fast. The soldiers attacked, but Mark's skill and calm presence made every move precise. He blocked, pushed, and countered with strength that surprised even him. Yet despite his efforts, they managed to capture him in the chaos, tying his hands with strong cords and dragging him away. Alira's scream echoed through the garden. Guards rushed forward, but the attackers had already vanished into secret tunnels. She tried to follow, but the path was blocked. Panic rose in her chest, but she pushed it aside. "This is a test," she whispered to herself. "I must not fail him." Soon after, a messenger arrived with a note from the rival house. It demanded that Alira abandon the human or face the destruction of her palace. They claimed he was a spy, a human who could not be trusted. Alira clenched her fists. Her people's loyalty was important, yes, but her heart would not bend. She turned to the council. "I will not abandon him. If he is taken, then I will go with him. My loyalty is my choice," some advisors argued. "Princess, you risk everything for a human. It is dangerous. You must act wisely." "I am acting wisely," she said firmly. "Mark has proven his loyalty and courage. To abandon him now is not wisdom. It is cowardice." As night fell, she prepared to act. She gathered a small group of trusted guards and made her way through secret passages. The palace gardens glowed faintly under the twin moons, and the paths were silent, but for the soft footsteps of her group. In the hidden dungeons of the rival house, Mark waited. He had been held in a cell lined with metal and stone. The air was cold and heavy. Though his hands were bound, his posture remained steady. The soldiers mocked him, calling him weak and unworthy, but he did not answer. His mind was on the princess, and on the promise he had made to protect her at all costs. Hours later, a shadow fell over the cell. Alira entered, her silver gown gleaming softly under the torchlight. She stepped close to the bars and spoke, her voice firm. "Mark, I will not leave you. Are you ready to come with me?" Mark's eyes met hers. Relief and gratitude shone in his gaze. "Princess, I am ready." With careful movement, they freed the bindings. The small group of loyal guards had cut the locks and cleared the path. Together, Alira and Mark moved silently through the tunnels, careful not to alert the rival soldiers. Every step was tense, every turn filled with potential danger, yet Mark remained calm. Finally, they reached the palace gardens. The night air felt like freedom. Alira turned to him. "You are safe now," she said. "I will not let them take you." Mark bowed slightly. "Princess, I am always safe when you are by my side." Her heart warmed at his words. In that moment, she realized that loyalty was not just about duty. It was about trust, courage, and care that went beyond orders or rank. Mark had shown all of these, and now she had done the same for him. As they returned to the palace, the city lights reflected in their eyes. The threat from the rival house was still real, but for now, they had overcome the first test. Their bond had grown stronger. Alira knew that Mark was more than a guard. He was a companion, a partner in facing whatever challenges might come. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, Alira spoke softly. "Mark, today you have shown more than strength. You have shown your heart, and I cannot deny it. You are brave in ways I never imagined, and I—" Mark stopped her with a calm gesture. "Princess, no words are needed now. Actions speak louder. We face the future together. And that is enough." She nodded. Her eyes shone with both admiration and growing affection. For the first time, she understood that love and loyalty were not weaknesses. They were a quiet power, the kind that could stand against fear, danger, and even betrayal. Outside, the city slept under the watch of twin moons. The rival house had been challenged, their plans slowed by the courage and quick thinking of a human guard and the wisdom of a princess who refused to abandon him. The palace was safe for the night, but they both knew the trials were not over. Alira lay in her bed that night, thinking of Mark. She remembered his calm voice, his steady hands, the way he had faced danger without hesitation, and she realized that her heart had changed completely. She trusted him with her life, and she felt a warmth that no courtly ceremony could bring. Mark, meanwhile, stood watch at the chamber door, his spear in hand. Though exhausted, he felt steady. His duty had not wavered, but now there was something more, something he had never expected. A bond had formed between him and the princess, one that would be tested again, yet one that also gave him quiet strength. The trial of loyalty had passed. Both had proven their courage, their trust, and their hearts. Yet both knew the greatest challenges were still to come. The morning after the rescue, the palace of Vera was calm, but the air carried tension. The rival house had not yet returned, and the city watched the royal walls with quiet caution. Princess Alira walked through the corridors, her silver gown, brushing softly against the polished floors. Mark followed closely behind, alert to every sound, yet his expression remained calm, steady as always. The king had summoned a council to discuss the future. The rival house had challenged them, claiming the princess's affection for a human was shameful and unworthy of the throne. The nobles spoke loudly, each argument sharper than the last. Some called for Mark to be removed, others warned that the rival house would attack again if they hesitated. Alira stood tall. Her voice was firm, unwavering. Mark has proven his loyalty and courage. He has saved my life more than once. His actions are worth more than words of envy or fear. I will not abandon him. The council fell silent for a moment. Even the king, usually reserved, studied her with a deep frown. Then he said, "You are brave, daughter, but bravery alone cannot protect a throne. What will you do if the rival house attacks openly?" Alira turned to Mark. "Together, we will face them." Mark nodded. "Princess, whatever comes, I will protect you." The council meeting ended with cautious approval. Some nobles grumbled, others stared in disbelief, but none dared speak further. The palace guards were doubled in number, watchtowers manned, and the outer walls strengthened. Yet even with preparation, Alira knew that true danger lay not in walls or weapons, but in the hearts of those who sought to challenge them. That night, she met Mark in the private garden. The moonlight reflected in the glowing leaves, and soft music drifted from the flowers, swaying in the wind. She looked at him, her silver eyes soft, yet determined. "Mark," she said, "all that has happened. I have realized something. You are more than a guard to me. You have become part of my life, part of my world. I trust you with everything." Mark's gaze met hers, calm and steady. "Princess, my life is yours to command. I have always chosen to stand by you, yet now I see that I do more than guard. I feel more than duty." Alira's heart beat faster. She reached out and took his hand. "Then know this. I care for you. I will not hide it any longer. We may face enemies, but we face them together." Mark bowed slightly, a small smile appearing on his face. "Then we are united, Princess. Whatever comes, we face it as one." Days passed, and the palace remained tense. Spies and messengers from the rival house moved through the city, but no attack came. It was as though the enemy hesitated, uncertain of what they faced. Alira and Mark used this time to strengthen the palace defenses, train the guards, and planned strategies. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. The princess spoke with him freely now, asking for advice, sharing her thoughts, and listening to his perspective. His wisdom, born of patience and experience, guided her in ways no council member could. One morning, a messenger arrived with news. The rival house had sent a delegation seeking to meet Alira in the palace gardens. They came with words of peace, offering negotiation if she agreed to end her attachment to the human. Alira met them with calm strength. She spoke firmly. "I will not abandon my guard, nor will I bend to fear or threats. If you wish peace, you will treat all who serve me with respect. If you come to fight, you will face the consequences." The delegation left, murmuring among themselves. The city's people, hearing of the princess's resolve, began to rally behind her. Stories spread of her courage, of the human guard who had defended her, and of the bond between them. What some had tried to turn into shame became a symbol of honor and loyalty. That evening, Alira and Mark stood on the palace balcony, watching the sunset paint the city in gold and crimson. The threat of the rival house remained, but the fear that had once shadowed the palace had lifted. "You see," Mark said quietly, "sometimes loyalty and courage matter more than strength or numbers. People remember deeds, not titles." Alira smiled, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Yes, and I have learned that love and trust are powerful too. They can turn fear into strength, doubts into unity." For the first time in many days, they felt a sense of peace. The trials, the attacks, the whispers, all had tested them, but they had endured. Together, they had faced danger and emerged stronger. In the weeks that followed, the rival house quietly withdrew. Perhaps they realized that Alira's people respected her decisions, that a princess who chose courage and loyalty could not be easily challenged. The city celebrated, not with grand feasts or parades, but with quiet admiration and respect for their leader and the human who had stood by her side. Alira and Mark continued their walks through the gardens, their conversations. Now free of tension or tests, she asked him of his home, his life, and his dreams. He listened to her hopes and fears. In every exchange, they learned more about each other, and their bond deepened. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Alira turned to Mark with a soft smile. "Mark, you have proven yourself in ways I never imagined. Not only as my guard, but as my friend, my partner, my heart. I wish to walk through life with you, not just in danger, but in every moment." Mark took her hand, his steady eyes full of warmth. "Princess, I have always chosen to stand by you. Now I choose to stand with you, in life as in duty, in peace as in danger." They stood together, watching the moons rise higher in the sky. The palace walls glowed softly, the city quiet and calm. Though challenges would surely come again, the unexpected bond between a human guard and an alien princess had changed more than hearts. It had changed the fate of the palace, the respect of the people, and the story of Vera itself. For in a world that measured strength by power alone, it was courage, loyalty, and love that proved strongest of all. Mark and Alira, standing side by side, had shown that even the humblest of hearts could shine brighter than the tallest towers, and that true strength came not from who you were, but from what you were willing to stand for.